Welcome to Face Space Invaders. In episode 31, my guest is Ezgi Karaca, who is an assistant professor at the Izmir Biomedicine and Genome Center and Dokuz Eylül University. Already from her early research years in the lab of Alexander Bonvin, Ezgi was deeply involved with the prediction and integrative modeling of protein-protein interfaces. Aside from contributing to the development and popularization of haddock, she was involved in several editions of the CASP competition as an evaluator. And as a consequence, her interests have been recently shifting to a critical evaluation of the field of macromolecular docking in the post-AlphaFold era, a question that affects us all in one way or another if you're doing computational biology. So our conversation starts at the interface of old and new, wondering where do legacy docking methods fit in the toolbox of today's computational biophysicists. We discuss what makes a particular software relevant for the community, both from the perspective of users and developers. Ezgi shares her observations on the impact AlphaFold and related prediction methods have had in these famous CASP competitions, and what it tells about their inner workings and shortcomings. Finally, we shift to talk about the opportunities and challenges of running an impactful scientific lab from Turkey, and the importance of training events in a time when paradigms are rapidly shifting. Hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. Okay, Ezgi Karaca, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Miloš, thank you.
So Ezgi, I understand you were there during the many iterations of development of haddock, both observing and contributing to progress in protein-protein docking and integrative structural biology. And I think so many of our listeners are routine users of these methods and these tools, and I would love to hear an insider's perspective on what has changed in the last several years. Have AI tools completely taken over? What are the use cases for legacy algorithms, and where do we still struggle to make progress in that?
Okay, so first of all, thanks a lot for your invitation. This has been a podcast that I have been following, and it's actually a very nice feeling for me to be one of the people who is being interviewed, let's say.
That's lovely to hear.
Coming back to your question, I think this question has multiple layers. I'll try to answer them layer by layer, starting with haddock. So my relationship with haddock started when I started my PhD in 2008 with Alexander Bonvin, so the main developer and the owner of haddock software in Utrecht in the Netherlands. So at the time, haddock was rather fresh. So its main paper was published a couple of years back. And the protocol, the idea was there. It was picking up, but it was obviously not as big as it was today. And it was a time when web servers were becoming a thing in a sense, like it was a time when people realized like you should provide your tool as a service, and then it will be used by many users around the world. And haddock had a web server as well. So in that context, when I started, the core idea was already there. And the idea of how to develop haddock further was already there as well. And the bottlenecks that were there at the time in the case of big molecule docking, let's say, so not protein small molecules, but protein-protein or protein RNA, protein DNA. The first one was the sampling problem. So at first you didn't know whether you sampled enough or not. And the second problem was, even if you knew how to sample things, you didn't know how to pick the right solution among all the solutions generated. And the third issue was, since we are dealing with large molecules, how are we gonna deal with conformational changes, especially the large ones that occur upon binding? So it's obviously interesting to list these also today, because even at the age of AI or at the age of AlphaFold, we are struggling with these three issues in terms of protein interaction modeling, and I guess we'll come to this throughout the time of this podcast. But concentrating on this within the framework of HEDOC, and which was actually what my PhD was about, was a very smart move on my advisor's end, because HEDOC actually works differently than the other alternative docking programs. It accepts input, external inputs from the user, which could be the binding interface, which could be orientation of the monomers, which could be something else, etc. And with this, actually, if you have such data, you are able to deal with the sampling problem better, because then you restrict your conformational space to a more real part. And scoring bits also can be eased a bit if you add external experimental data to score your complexes next to standard scoring functions. But regarding the third one, dealing with conformational changes, this is and still something that needs to be dealt with externally. Like if you expect a domain motion upon binding, then you have to generate your ensembles or dissected domains before the docking protocol, and then feed the ensemble or different domains into your docking protocol. So this was what my PhD was about, generally how to integrate data to address these problems. But then obviously not only with this, but with multiple other protocols, with multiple other approaches, HEDOC became something that was picked up by the community very widely. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that besides having a web interface, there has been also already quite some time workshops organized around teaching HEDOC online and in person. I think this is very, very important in computational structural biology to make your software used widely. And second, it has been picked up so nicely because it is really being shaped by the response of the users. Okay, it's an academic world. You can't implement something immediately like people could do in companies, maybe as user feedback. It takes time, but what I've observed throughout the years, even after I stopped developing things for HEDOC, what I have observed was like sooner or later, the main complaints or the main wishes of the users are implemented or will be implemented in HEDOC. I think these two aspects made the program and its user-friendliness obviously very widely and nicely picked up by the community. So this, as I said, like your question contained multiple layers. So one layer is like, okay, we should continue, I think to address one layer, I wanted to say like, if we want to have a software to be continually used by the community, a biomolecular modeling software, you have to continue growing it. You have to continue updating it and make it user-friendly and find a way, which is costly obviously, but find a way to advertise it and make it understandable for the whole community through in-person interactions.
If I can, I think it's also a good call for everyone who's using those tools to give your feedback. Don't just scream at the computer. If you struggle with something, look who's developing the tool and get in touch. I myself, as a software developer, really love it when someone writes to me with a bug report or something that they're trying to do and it's not working, because it's like I cannot test everything. But you're raising a very good point there.
Definitely. And as a second layer, whether HEDOC or related programs are dead right now, considering the state of the AlphaFold, just putting it bluntly out. Yeah, they're still needed, but less than earlier, obviously. But they are still needed because in the context of protein interaction modeling with any big biomolecule, protein or RNA, etc., AlphaFold is not able to address all types of interactions at the moment. And this is especially the case where the coevolutionary signal is not strong, like in the case of antibody-antigen interaction modeling or viral, like host-pathogen interaction modeling, viral protein modeling, interaction modeling, etc. So I think one can confidently say that in the case of monomer structure prediction, this is the best that it can get for a long time, I guess. But for protein interaction modeling, there is definitely, there are gaps still. And the gaps or the challenges are the exact challenges that I mentioned. But the severeness of the challenges are different now. That's the main difference.
Right. So those tools still haven't learned the physics. And this further debate, I think, now in the community, whether they're just memorizing patterns or memorizing entire complexes, right? Or they are learning something fundamental. And I don't know where the current consensus lies, but I feel it's like they're memorizing patterns. And if the pattern, as you say, is not there for an antibody in the training set, it's not going to be there in the prediction.
But I think also what AlphaFold does as an extra is, like in analogy with Haddock, it also takes experimental data as input. So if you don't feed any multiple sequence alignment to AlphaFold, okay, we can leave out the template because we don't always have template information. But if we don't feed multiple sequence alignments into AlphaFold, it's not going to work nice, even for monomers. So I think this is a bit in analogy with Haddock in a sense that if you have good input data in this instance, if you have a multiple sequence alignment for a dimer, let's say, where signal-wise it's somehow obvious for the machine, of course not for us, but for the AI machine, it's somehow obvious that these certain residues should be at the interface and these certain residues should be defining the structure of the monomer, then it gives a very good prediction and it gives it very fast and it's very confident about it. So in this instance, okay, it doesn't know the physics, that's for sure, but it knows, and I think this has been the great part of this tool, it knows how to interpret the sequences, which is in the end also an experimental data. I mean, it's an outcome of genomics efforts. So if, for example, I don't know, one could use a denser sequence database, maybe they could be more lucky in some certain cases. But for antibody-antigen interactions, for example, I think for AlphaFold or for other docking tools, the main reason for their struggle is that also experimentally, we don't know how an antibody really recognizing the target. So the physics are also not there for these interactions. And this is really an ongoing research effort. There are many labs who are only concentrated on understanding antibody-antigen interactions. But with what we have at hand, I don't know how successful they can get in the short term.
Right. And there's also the question of actual experimental restraints, right? So Haddock can incorporate things like restraints from cross-linking and so on. I know that there are some AI structure prediction tools now that start to incorporate those, that you can say, okay, this residue should be within this and this much distance from another residue, but this is not something that's standard, right? This is probably where legacy tools still have an advantage if you have a lot of experimental restraints.
Exactly. And maybe sometimes even not a lot, maybe in some certain instances, you have 2 instances and some other interaction pattern that you think that should be there, and then you can get a good outcome. And it's indeed the case. For example, the recent efforts in tutorials from Haddock's end has been mostly concentrated on antibody-antigen modeling. But this also now is a mixture of AI and Haddock tools in a sense that, for example, you can generate different ensembles of the loops, CDR loops, by using an AI method. And instead of using MD, you can do this fastly. Okay, maybe it's not proper, but still, then you can use this as an ensemble input, things like this. So I guess for these difficult systems, it's not either one of them, but probably to make use of both in the best way you can.
Right. Another thing that's also part of those prediction methods on the AI side are language models, right? So I assume that sometimes you can work with improving the language model that's more informative about possible interactions rather than the MSA. But have you looked into that in any systematic way?
Not systematically, but just with my current knowledge, I feel like without having anything extra like MSA, I don't think that you can really converge this to a solvable problem because we don't have enough data for this. So if you think about how AlphaFold trained, okay, it took all the structures in the PDV, but how many structures do we have in the PDV? I think one of the main reasons why AlphaFold was successful was that it is combining an input and output relationship in the end. So that's why I just cannot foresee, but it could be also my missing knowledge, but I just don't see how this can be achieved with the level of data we have.
I see, because anyway, we get a lot of data from bioinformatics, so all the metagenomics is providing tons of implicit data on structural relationships, right? But
Yes.
probably the way it is being fed into the models is going to matter a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was wondering if with the methods that we already have, can we start moving towards something like interaction prediction? Do you think we are at the stage where this will become a thing, where like we can take an entire, maybe a prokaryotic organism and figure out interactions between all the proteins? In principle, of course, not with a lot of detail, because some of them are mediated by things other than proteins. But you think we're moving in that direction also?
There has been already efforts towards this direction. I think the first attempt that the field tried to do was during my PhD. So people really tried to do this by using docking methods, but more like rigid body docking methods. And even at the time, that really started a huge excitement in the field. Though if you don't know how, if you're not sure about your scoring function, obviously this will generate data and it will be as much. But that was the best thing that they could do, and it was already quite pioneering, I think. And this should be around 2010 and 2011. And nowadays, there are already 2 or 3 papers out that did this, maybe even a bit more for a small organism. Also for one I saw recently that I haven't read yet, one was done for human interactions. But there one has to see how people filtered out things. So I think sampling, like you can sample as much as you want with a high-end supercomputer right now. You can try all-to-all combinations. Though, okay, you have a bottleneck of not knowing the stoichiometry there. But somehow, if you also have some partial stoichiometry information for some of the systems, sampling is definitely achievable. It's not going to be a bottleneck. But again, there you have a problem, like in the case of interaction modeling, we have a feeling for AlphaFold, how AlphaFold scoring behaves, but we are still not sure about how it really behaves. So we don't have a cutoff, as in the case of monomer modeling, for example. If you have a value above 0.8, then this is definitely an interaction, an IPTM of 0.8, for example. I mean, probably yes, but maybe not. So this is also an ongoing discussion in the community, but technically this is totally achievable.
Right, because in the end we would like to also predict affinities, right? And going from those very, very implicit scores. I mean, back in the day, I remember docking software used to have a more interpretable scoring that somehow tries to approximate delta G in one way or another. But with AI tools, we essentially just have this quality prediction. And do we know anything about how good it is at trying to recover relative affinities, at least? Maybe absolute affinities is a lot to ask.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that it has this power. But on the other hand, it works much better than the docking scoring functions. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. So can we see the impact of, for example, mutations?
No, but AlphaFold is not meant for this anyway. We can't do this with AlphaFold. But for example, the BioIMU tool, they did not retrain AlphaFold, but they fine-tune it with MD data and with mutation, with data that contains the impact of mutation, let's say. They claim that with this protocol, they can predict the impact of mutation. But with AlphaFold, because it was not designed or trained for this, you can't do this. You can't predict affinity. You can't predict the impact of mutation across protein interfaces. You can't do these things. But they also, they never claim, to give them the proper credit, they never claim to do so. But people just want to get most out of this tool, right? So that's why people have been trying
That's why
to
I'm
make these
asking.
correlations. Yeah.
Exactly,
But
because
I don't
then
think that it
some things
works.
come out. Some things come out, but then people will come back and criticize that, yeah, this is not physics. But yeah, some things are actually correlating in interesting ways. That should not be like the only questions that you never have any guarantee, but maybe you have a hint and wonder how much we can formalize this. At this
I
stage.
don't think that there's much
Probably
hope there.
not much.
Yeah.
I
Well,
see.
you should use AlphaFold primarily for a static structure prediction. So this is its primary aim, and this is what it has been developed for in the end. But by using some tricks, you can try to sample different conformations, and this for monomers, not for interactions at the moment. Or you can try to score your designed monomers or interfaces. This was tried by Sergei Shunnikov in a couple of papers. So this has been shown to work, but beyond this, I don't think that you should do it unless somebody else will prove it otherwise. Yeah,
Of course.
Probably you should
So
not you should not use it for this for the purposes that you would like to learn actually.
Yeah, so we can introduce variability with one set of methods and then score with another set of methods, and probably that's the most physics relevant or physically justified way of doing that. Okay.
Yeah, mixture of methods is still allowed. Yeah. I mean, it's just the structure prediction problem is much easier right now, which actually gives us more opportunity maybe to spend more time on some of the questions that we did not have time earlier. Like now you can predict the structure or interaction of X and Y very fast and hopefully confidently. Okay, then you can create your own data set on something in a very fast manner, which is great. Then you can also play with any kind of physics-based tool with these predictions. So I guess one should see the advancement in this way, not as a sort of a solution to all problems that we have in the community.
We can start moving towards real biology and real hypothesis generation, right? Because that was always something we could not do as computational people. We could just verify someone else's ideas.
That's so true, yeah.
To some extent, yeah. So that's an exciting time to work on this. Yeah, for example, what would you say about the last CASP competition? What were the most interesting takeaways there? Because you already mentioned antibody predictions related to antibodies and nanobodies. I know that these are hard, and this was also highlighted there, but was there any other interesting point that you would like to highlight from that?
So I was the assessor for the protein complex category for 2 rounds in CASP. This was in 2022, just when AlphaFold emerged for the tertiary structure prediction category. And there was another round in 2024, but I wasn't involved in this, though obviously I closely followed what happens in the competition. And it seems like even though in between AlphaFold 3 was released, the challenges in the case of protein interaction modeling hasn't changed since the previous CASP round, since CASP 15. So the last round was 16. And this also we see in AlphaFold 3's paper. So in the standard protein complex modeling, there doesn't seem to be a much difference compared to AlphaFold 2. But in AlphaFold 3 paper, they said like if you run AlphaFold 3 1,000 times, then you'll get a performance boost. But then in the paper, they did not compare what happens if you run AlphaFold 2.3 1,000 times as well. I think that would have been a more fair comparison. But in any case, running AlphaFold 3 is so fast, even though you get the exact same outcome. I think running 3 is way more advantageous compared to 2.3. But in complexes, the bottleneck is multiple sequence alignments dependent, and it hasn't changed. But even so, since we experienced the pre-AlphaFold and post-AlphaFold parts in person, one can confidently say that the performance compared to the pre-AlphaFold time in the case of protein complex modeling is the performance boost is amazing. Like it's really like 3 times, 4 times more community performance compared to the previous time. But again, as I was mentioning, the field still has some challenges. And I would like to maybe mention a nice anecdote that I had with John Molt. So CAS community also, they have been getting into the complex business since the last 10, 12 years. So earlier, this was picked up by Capri, another competition. They still go on. But CAS was there mostly focused on tertiary structure prediction. So then when I was doing the assessment and then afterwards, especially after AlphaFold came out and people started to use AlphaFold for protein complex prediction, I was trying to explain them the change and how impactful that would be and how amazing the performance boost is, etc. But even with them, it was at first difficult to understand because, protein interaction modeling is something that you can't really boil down to a single sentence or a single hypothesis that would say like, okay, Leventhal paradox, X's paradox, or Y's paradox. Because the landscape of binding is very different with different biomolecules. And it's really hard to put down to a single hypothesis. It's maybe even impossible because it's very context dependent, very biomolecule dependent, etc. And once when I was trying to explain them like how good things are, even though for some things, for some targets, AlphaFold missed the outcome. And finally, they got me. And I remember John Noll telling me like the problem of the complex modeling community is that not problem, but the fact that the problem is not so famous compared to tertiary structure prediction is that you don't have something like Levinthal's paradox or Anderson's dogma, And that really stayed with me. He's right. But on the other hand, this doesn't make the prediction challenge less important compared to tertiary structure prediction, obviously.
Right. So it's too simple in principle, and it doesn't strike people as something that should be impossible. That's a funny point. Yes, haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
But then for these community events, you alluded to how important this to get people together, right? When we were organizing this recording, you were in the process of preparing for an EMBO workshop, and you had some interesting takeaways in terms of not only what those workshops do for the workshop participants, but also how interesting and stimulating they are for the tutors.
Yes, this is a very good point to bring up, I think, and to discuss a bit. So the EMBO course that we organize is actually the 5th round of the same course, but the content is not always different. Obviously, it has been updated over the years to match the needs of the community. So it was first started by Alexandra and organized 2 times in Barcelona. Then we brought it here. One we had to do virtual, and then 2 times in person. We organized it biannually so far. And in this round, we try to give as much weight as we can to AI, emerging AI methods. And the focus has been all along of these courses, biomolecular interaction modeling. At first, and for the first 4 iterations, the central idea was how to use experimental data to predict complexes, but this time it was how to use AI and dynamics information to properly predict complex structures. We had a great lineup of speakers, and the other great thing was that EMBO provided us with enough funding so that we can host our tutors for the whole duration of the course. But also they were really kind enough to stay with us throughout the week. They are all super busy people, so that was really a privilege for everyone, I think. And the idea was like we started with classical methods in protein interaction modeling, then continued with AlphaFold and AlphaFold extension tools. Then we finalized our course with insights from dynamics. We even had a short molecular dynamics tutorial. And on the last day, we had a whole dedicated day on disordered proteins and the modeling the interactions of disordered proteins. We also have some experimental data content, which was very useful during this course as well. So I don't want to mention each tutor name one by one, so people can look it up. If they Google for Izmir and integrative modeling, I think this is the only thing that's going to pop up in EMBO. But having all these great minds together and having a great selection of students. So we had 25 students and they are really carefully picked. Since we offered a very nice contemporary content, we had a good number of applications. So these sessions were very lively. And in the end, by the end of some lectures, we found ourselves like having a discussion all together. Tutors were inputting things and then discussing with students. But in some instances, the discussion was going on between the tutors. And then that made me realize, which but it's more solid when you see it with your own eyes. The field is developing so fast that it is also an opportunity to have these people to discuss among each other, or it's a great idea or great opportunity, because since the main development did not come from academia, and the way they made the research is totally different than our type of daily research, I think even between professors or PIs, it's now very important to get together in these events and discuss the limitations or discuss the advantages or discuss how you can make use of X tool for Y purpose. Because these things are still not very nicely protocoled, put down somewhere, or maybe they are somewhere, but there are so many things published, you basically lose track of it. And then X person doesn't know about Y paper, basically. And so in the end, it was a course for everyone. And that gave a really good feeling to all people who stayed with us. And it was very energizing and honoring for us as well. And I think especially now it's even more important to organize things like this because now it's the time to discuss, basically. Now it's the time when we really start to understand the impact and the limits of the tools that have been emerging in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it was a common theme for many past conversations here, how much science is a social enterprise in the end and how much it's hard to do science just in our own labs, talking to lab mates, but not really to other labs across the world. And that kind of leads me to the last question, because this is something I already, I think, discussed a bit with Vlad Kojukaru, who is now across the pond from you in Romania.
Yes.
But exactly about your positioning in Turkey, which is, I mean, it is great that you're now able to organize such events. And I will myself be moving to Poland. I'm thinking of the issue of moving to places which are not historically as integrated within the scientific community. And what is your experience exactly? I mean, overall, how do you see the history of moving back to your country of origin and establishing kind of highly visible lab there? What are the benefits versus risks, and how much more work with this compared to, or less work maybe, compared to staying in, let's say, Western Europe or the US?
So indeed, as you are anticipating, there are hardships, but there are things that are easier as well. It's just the context and the system is different and will be very different. For example, it will be different for you in Poland than what things have been for me in Turkey. But before specifically coming into the advantages and disadvantages, I have to highlight one thing before I forget about it. I think when you move out of the center of computational structural biology research, and if you talk about Europe and then you start going more towards the periphery scientifically, then it becomes really important to be a part of a European network, to continue being a part of a European network. This is really what made the difference for me, like at the start. So I am here already for almost 8 years now. So the first 2 years, they were really difficult, like extremely difficult. But before coming to what was difficult at the time, maybe I should mention what changed my life by the end of these 2 years. And it was the installation grant that I got through EMBO. So that network, so the installation grant can be also received in Poland. I'm sure that you're aware of it as well. In a couple of European countries, researchers can't make use of, for example, in the case of EMBO membership of the country as much as a German scientist would do, or a British. So after understanding this, they released this different call, which is not possible to get by a German lab or by a British lab. But someone from Turkey, we are also a member of EMBO because of this, someone from Poland, someone from Lithuania, etc. So they can get this grant. So through this grant, they support you for 5 years. The money is for our condition. The money was great. So I built my lab from scratch with the money that they provided. The money is flexible, so you can buy whatever you want. Of course, as long as you justify it somehow. But the other thing is that as soon as you're in there, they integrate you in a network where you can go to meetings, through their support. And it's not going to be deducted from your own research money. It is something extra. So for 5 years, you have this extra luxurious life, let's say. I mean, for someone being in Turkey, you don't think about which conference should I go or how am I going to do it because the currency changes right now so crazy, like all these things. I stopped thinking about them for 5 years, and they also support your lab members. And this has been amazing. That was the real career booster for me. So that was the first thing. And I think having any type of grant or agreement that will help you to keep your contacts or to keep you tied to the main European network would be a great plus, would ease your life much better. If you and some other scientists, if they want to go back to their country of origin. And the second thing that was a booster for me was being a CASP assessor. I guess that came thanks to the work that I did in main or Central Europe. So, and that gives the message as long as you did good work, sooner or later, you're going to get the benefit of it, even though you didn't do that work in your current place. Because in your current place, for what happened to me was it took a lot of time until I could settle my lab because things are either slow or things are different. The way science is perceived, the pace is totally different. Time flows differently. I mean, things are always, you have the urgency here as well, but the type of the things being urgent is more on the bureaucratic end than on the scientific end. So that's why it's very hard to balance these things, especially if you're a newcomer, because you don't know the system. You don't know which no's will be okay, but which no's you should avoid to say, because in the end, it's a career and you have to take care of yourself as well. And not everything is about science. So these things were really difficult for me to understand the culture, to understand the system, to steer myself with the more like a Central European mindset in my home country. Even though it's my home country, I totally changed my work culture, obviously, during the time when I was abroad. So these have been very difficult. But the good things, so these are the disadvantages, but the advantage is that being in a place where people really don't understand en masse what you're doing also makes you kind of nicely invisible. So I can work on anything I want to work on, which is great. I really love it. So there's no institution. Exactly. There's no institutional pressure saying okay, now, I don't know, concentrate on this type of drug development or something, which can happen actually in Central Europe because depending on where you are, because there's big money coming in. And when there's big money coming in, then the responsibilities are different as well. And if there's not much money going on, then you don't have the same level of responsibility too. This made actually our research very flexible and helped us adapt to the changing atmosphere, changing landscape in the AlphaFold era, let's say. And this also allowed me to do the type of research that I want to do here.
Right. I was always torn between this, listen to the advisory boards, what they want you to do versus what do you really want to do, knowing that it's not optimizing maybe your career for maximum impact, but it's keeping you excited and keeping you really willing to push the thing that you're after. Yeah, that's an interesting point there.
Sometimes being not seen that much can be an advantage, as long as you can keep your good contacts, obviously, and as long as people remember that you are there. And I think for this, I didn't start for that, obviously, but it was a side outcome. Organizing courses in your home place, I think it's a really great advantage also for the people to come and then to see your students, to see your research institute, to see the environment, to see your culture.
Absolutely. I think that there are great opportunities exactly for engaging more people with science, especially, I'm thinking of my Polish background, but places that don't have that much developed science yet often have this kind of prestige push, right, for showing off that, we actually have people who are doing great things. So if you can be that person, it's even better for you.
Exactly. That's very true. That's very true.
So hopefully there's plenty of space for people who want to continue. There's always this question of how many people can remain PIs after their postdocs or PhDs. And of course, the mainstream institutions cannot stretch beyond their reasonable sizes. So we have to have a broader maybe perspective or discussion on where people can go and how to organize their lives. That's why I appreciate your feedback there and your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, maybe this is the time when our field is saturated and kind of generated enough human power to go back and to also spread the knowledge. So I was making more pragmatic comments, obviously, because also these are the things that people usually don't discuss about. And there's also this other great side is that basically you're teaching your own people and they're really in need of this. And this is really, the kind of satisfaction that you get from this is you can't measure that with something else. You can't measure it with money or with, being X person at Y place. So you also have these things as well, like the opportunities that you didn't have. Now you can provide them to your own students. Like, how nice is this? But this is the emotional, more like the emotional bit, which was important for me. That's why I wanted to come back. But on the other hand, maybe now the field is saturated as well. Now, beyond the people who are taking things from this emotional end, beyond these people, maybe more people would need to do this. As you said, maybe they would need to locate in places where they're not even from. Maybe, a Turkish people would find an opportunity in Poland, maybe. Maybe in time, we will come to this point because the field is really growing and there are more and more scientists being raised. So,
sure, many things to think about for the young people out there planning their careers.
Yeah, tough time. Huh?
Yes, but hopefully full of opportunities. And it's nice to be on the rising curve. It feels good, and it gives us a purpose in the end.
Yes.
Okay. Ezgi Karaca, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your history and your observations and your ideas with us.
Thank you, Mimosh. Thanks for the invite. It was great and fun.
It's been a pleasure. Okay. Thank you a lot. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode of Space Invaders.